Today we're going to take a look at a brand new retrofit smart lock from Aqara, the Aqara U200, and there are a lot of good things going for this lock. It's certainly one of the better looking retrofit locks, and by default comes with a keypad, and that also looks nice as well. A lot of these locks claim to have various ways of unlocking your door, and this one is no different. You can unlock it using your phone with the Aqara app. You can of course physically unlock the door using the knob on the lock, and you can use your key from the outside. With the keypad you can set up PIN codes, you can use Aqara NFC tags, or you can use your fingerprint. And in my experience the FingerPrint Reader has been extremely responsive. Now you may have heard a lot of these options before, but one you don't hear as often just yet is Apple HomeKey support. So as well as all the other options, you can use your iPhone or your Apple Watch to open the door just by tapping it against the keypad. So let's take a look at this lock in a bit more detail. So the first thing to mention is that Aqara did send me this lock so that I could give it a test and review it for you guys. But as with all of my reviews, I'll give you an honest review of all the good and all of the bad bits that I've found. I've already briefly mentioned most of the various unlocking options, so let's now go through some of the details and the specs of the lock. Starting with the batteries, the keypad takes 4 AAA batteries, which come included in the box, and because AAA batteries are so common, it's nice and easy to replace them when that time comes. You also have the option to wire in the keypad with the 2 contacts on the back, and you can use it with 12 to 24 volts AC or DC. With the lock itself, there will probably be mixed feelings here because it comes with a custom lithium battery specifically designed for the lock. The benefit is that you don't need to worry about finding the right batteries or paying out for new ones when you need to replace them. You can just use a normal USB charger and plug it into the USB port on the battery itself. I used a power bank to charge it so that I could keep the door in operation whilst it was being charged. The downside is if you have an issue with the battery, then a replacement is probably going to be costly and inconvenient while you're getting it replaced. However, I would say that it's likely that you will probably replace or upgrade your smart lock before the battery actually starts to show any signs of age. The battery is supposed to last up to 6 months between charges, but I haven't really had it long enough to be able to say whether this is accurate or not. The other things in the box are what you would expect. You've got a few attachments for if you have a door knob on the inside rather than having a key. You've got a mounting bracket which is for US deadbolts, and you've got some 3M pads for sticking the lock to the door. Now the next thing we definitely need to talk about is connectivity. If you are using the keypad, then it uses Bluetooth to communicate with the lock, and similarly if you're using the Aqara Home app on your phone close to the door, then it will also use Bluetooth, and this is what you'll need to use to change some of the lock settings. If you plan to connect the lock to the Aqara ecosystem or another smart home platform, then it uses the latest thread technology instead. This means that you either need to have the latest thread capable Aqara hub, the Aqara M3 hub, which I have already done a video on, so check that out if you're interested, or you need to have another thread border router. This will typically be an Apple HomePod or an Apple TV 4K. I'm pleased to say that I have this lock connected to Home Assistant via the M3 hub using Matter over Thread, and it's been working fine. It's been great to be able to control the lock from my Home Assistant dashboard and set up some automations for it as well. It currently only shows the lock entity though, so there's no door state or battery sensors showing for the Matter integration. One important thing to note here is that if you do plan to use the Apple HomeKey functionality, then you do specifically need an Apple thread border router. So this is the HomePod or the Apple TV. Unfortunately, I don't have an Apple threadboard router, so I couldn't test out the Apple HomeKey functionality. Whilst we're talking about its functionality, there are a few things that I've been really impressed with whilst using this lock. The first one is one that I touched on earlier, and that's the responsiveness of the FingerPrint Reader. It claims an identification rate of 98.6%, and in my experience, the recognition and actual speed of unlocking the door has been much better on the Aqara keypad versus the SwitchBot touch keypad. It also feels like the lock has a lot of torque. I can't find any official specs on how powerful the lock is, but I don't think you'll have any problem unlocking or locking your door. And with this in mind, you're going to want to ensure that the lock is well secured to your door. The included bracket gives you a couple of options. If your lock cylinder sticks out by at least 3.5mm, then you can use the included Allen key and the little screws to grip onto your lock. This would be the easiest and quickest installation method if you can do that. If your lock doesn't stick out enough, then you'll either need to replace your cylinder lock for a longer one, which isn't difficult but is still a pain and an extra cost, or you can just use the 3M sticky pads that are included. If you use a 3M pad to stick the lock to the door, then it's really important that you clean the surface first and apply pressure to it for a few minutes afterwards. Anyone who complains of 3M pads falling off has probably not been thorough enough in this step. None of mine have ever been close enough to falling off, and in fact it's been really difficult to get it off if you need to. Before buying this lock, make sure that it's compatible with your type of door. As with most things, there are so many different variants that it's hard to cater for every type of lock. I live in the UK and have a Euro cylinder lock, but it does also cater for US deadbolts and seems to include fixings in the box for this as well. But if you are in the US and plan on buying this lock, then I also recommend that you check out some US videos as well and see how their installation went. Once your lock is connected to the Aqara Home app, there are lots of other settings available that you might want to explore, so I'll just go through a couple of them now. It has an auto lock feature, which automatically locks the door once it's been closed. This lock uses an accelerometer though to detect whether the door is closed or not, and so I found it not to be totally reliable. I personally think that they should have just included one of those little magnets that you could attach to the side of your door, but if you use the Aqara door sensors, then you could use one of these instead and then just set up an automation. This is what I would recommend that you do. If you do decide to use the auto lock mode, then there is also a mode called passage mode, which allows you to prevent the door from automatically locking until the next time that you manually lock the door. So this could be useful if you're going in and out of the house, for example, to bring your shopping in. Another feature is a tamper feature called failed attempt lockout, which locks the keypad for a specified duration after 10 incorrect unlock attempts. You can set a lock timeout of either 1 to 5 minutes, 30 minutes, or you can disable this feature if you want to. I would personally recommend enabling this setting even if you have it set to 1 minute, as this will help prevent some brute force attacks. By default, the lock unlocks the door really quickly and does make quite a noise when doing so. It has a quiet, standard and fast mode so that you can unlock the door slower, but it makes the lock a bit quieter. Personally, I don't mind it because the sound lasts for less than a second and I like the convenience of unlocking the door quickly, and so I'm going to be leaving it on the fast mode. So now I just want to summarise some of the bits that I like about this lock, and then we'll talk about a few of the negatives. I love the responsiveness of the fingerprint reader and the speed that the door actually unlocks at. I really like my switch bot locks, but they don't really feel any quicker than opening the door with a key, and I often find myself standing there for a few seconds before I can actually get into the house. This is definitely not the case with the Aqara U200 lock, and it feels like a really quick experience. The other thing I like about this lock is the aesthetics of it. It comes in black or silver and has the usual Aqara feel to it, even though it is mainly plastic. It's not a small lock, but it is a powerful retrofit lock, and so I think the size is pretty decent for what it does. If you want something to be more discreet, then you're probably going to need to consider an integrated smart lock instead. The next big win for this lock is the number of unlocking options available. As well as being able to unlock with the keypad, your phone and NFC tag, you can of course connect it to the usual smart home platforms such as Apple Home, Amazon, Google and SmartThings. And because it's a Matter thread device, it means you can also connect it to Home Assistant, and for me that's a really big plus. I haven't tried it directly with a Sonoff dongle because I'm using the Aqara M3 hub, so let me know in the comments if you buy this lock and if you connect it using a Sonoff dongle and what your experience is. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the negatives and a couple of the things that have annoyed me whilst using the lock over the past couple of months. There are some settings which make you enable the keypad before being able to change the setting. I'm guessing this is because the keypad goes into some sort of sleep power saving mode, but it does seem unnecessary to have to physically be next to the keypad and press a button before you can change some of the settings. This is is the auto unlock and also the failed attempt lockout as well. This could be particularly annoying if, say, you've got a rental property and you've got it on there, because you might not visit that location very often. If your lock is connected to the internet using the Aqara hub, then I don't really see why you shouldn't be able to change these settings remotely. Having said that, I imagine that most of the settings will be set and forget, and hopefully once you've set it up, you won't have to go into the Aqara Home app very much. There aren't really many complaints for the lock itself at all. My main irritation is that Aqara tends to give their products to creators before they're actually ready, and so you get various features that don't work, and then you find out a few days later that they are working. It sometimes makes it very difficult to give you as viewers an actual accurate assessment of what features you can expect when you buy that product. It can sometimes also lead to customer frustration as well, as they keep releasing things in the wrong order, which can sometimes unnecessarily give negative product reviews as well, even though they're actually decent products. For example, they released the P1 thread door sensor before any of their hubs actually supported it, and then they released their Thread and Matter M3 hub, even though it supported very few thread devices. The good news is that they are usually very quick to introduce the missing functionality, and they don't leave you waiting months like most companies do. But it's certainly something that might put you off buying an Aqara product, particularly in the early phases of its release. All of the firmware updates that I've received whilst I've had this lock I've found to be reliable in terms of actual functionality of the lock itself, but the latest firmware update has also enabled some of the additional lock features that weren't working for me previously. So if you buy this lock, then I think you should be fine. And I'll leave an affiliate link in the description if you do want to buy it, so please consider using that if you're going to buy this lock, because it will really help support the channel. Another thing I'm not too keen on, which I briefly mentioned, is the lack of a magnetic door sensor to detect whether the door is open or closed, but this one's not really a showstopper. One thing that might drive you mad though is the setup process when you're adding your fingerprint.
Continue capturing more fingerprint area. Fingerprint area repeated. Please try again. Continue capturing more fingerprint area. Continue capturing more fingerprint area repeated.
And the final frustration I wanted to mention is not Aqara specific as such, and more of a general frustration when setting up Matter and Thread devices. It still feels like a bit of a clunky process, and I often find that you get setup failures, or it's not really clear what order you should do things in. I often just end up pressing various pairing buttons or scanning QR codes until something works. The Aqara devices are sometimes even more confusing because they sometimes have an Aqara QR code, a HomeKit QR code, Matter pairing codes, and they're sometimes on the hub itself, sometimes on the end devices, or sometimes in the manuals, so it can be quite confusing to set them up. So these negatives aside, I have to say that using the lock day to day has been a really positive one, and I would recommend it to anyone considering installing a Retrofit Smart Lock. I've still only been using it for a couple of months though, so I'll probably leave a pinned comment and I'll update it in 6 months or a year or so and let you know how I'm getting on. Well, that's it for today, so please consider subscribing if you haven't already and liking the video if you enjoyed it. So thanks, until next time.